In 1955, the banks told Americans to start carrying credit, the food industry told them to buy frozen dinners, and the government told them inflation was harmless. Gardens shrank, pantries emptied. But here is the twist. The families who ignored the marketing stretched a $1955 further than most modern households stretch $100. Number 14 saved one Iowa family $4,000 last year. Number 3 ended with an executive order in 1965. These habits were so effective, entire industries were built on making you forget. Hit the subscribe button. What you learn could save you serious money. Let us count them down. Number 20, the Sunday meal plan. In 1955, every American mother sat at the kitchen table on Sunday afternoon with a pencil, a notebook, and the church bulletin. She wrote 7 days of meals. Monday, meatloaf. Tuesday, leftover meatloaf sandwiches. Wednesday, chicken and dumplings. Thursday, chicken soup from the bones. Friday, tuna casserole. Saturday, hamburgers. Sunday, roast. Every meal was planned around what was in the pantry, what was on sale at the A&P, and what stretched longest. The grocery list flowed directly from the meal plan. Studies done by household economists at Iowa State in 1962 showed that families using a weekly meal plan spent 22 to 28% less on groceries than families who shopped without one. A 1955 family spent $20 a week on food and fed 6 people. Today, the average American family spends $9,000 yearly on groceries and throws away $1,500. They knew. We forgot. Number 19. The cash grocery envelope. Every American housewife in 1955 walked into the grocery store with 2 things in her purse: a handwritten list and a small envelope of cash. The envelope contained exactly what she had budgeted for groceries that week, calculated to the dime. She picked up items only from the list. She tracked the running total in her head as she walked the aisles. When she reached the register, the total never exceeded the cash in the envelope. There was no overdraft. There was no impulse buy. There was no temptation to grab the candy bar at checkout because there was no extra money. Surveys done by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1958 showed that women shopping with a cash envelope and a written list spent 31% less than women using a checkbook. The discipline was the system. Modern apps defeat it by design. Number 18, cooking from scratch. In 1955, the term convenience food barely existed. Real food meant raw ingredients combined by hand. A 1955 American mother made her own bread for 9 cents a loaf when store-bought was 18. She made her own salad dressing from oil, vinegar, and mustard for pennies. She made her own soup from yesterday's chicken bones. She made her own cookies, biscuits, cakes, and pies from flour, sugar, butter, and eggs that totaled less than $1 for an entire week of baking. Scratch cooking is roughly 60 to 75% cheaper than the packaged equivalent. The U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed this number in studies from 1958 forward. Today, the average American household spends $3,700 a year on convenience foods that cost the manufacturer pennies to produce. The skill of basic cooking still saves families thousands a year. Almost nobody under 40 has it anymore. Number 17. The leftover transformation. Sunday roast at the 1955 dinner table was never just Sunday roast. A 5-pound chuck roast cost $1.25 and fed a family 3 meals across the week. Sunday night, sliced roast with potatoes and gravy. Monday lunch, cold roast sandwiches with mustard on homemade bread. Tuesday dinner, beef stew made from the trimmings, the bones, and yesterday's vegetables. Nothing was thrown out. The bones went into the stock pot. The fat was rendered for cooking. The cooking liquid became gravy or soup base. One $1.25 piece of meat became roughly 9 servings of food across 3 days. Modern cooking magazines call this meal prep and charge $200 for a course. Your grandmother called it Tuesday. Today, the average American household throws away 30% of the food it buys, which works out to roughly $1,500 a year wasted on groceries that go straight to landfill. Number 16, the deep pantry. The 1955 American kitchen was deliberately built around storage. A working family kept a 30-day supply of staples at all times. 20 pounds of flour, 10 pounds of sugar, 5 pounds of rice, 5 pounds of dried beans, coffee, salt, lard, and canned tomatoes filled the shelves behind the cookware. Bulk purchases were made twice a year directly from the local mill or wholesale grocer. The cost difference between bulk pantry stocking and weekly retail shopping was 32 to 40%, according to USDA records. A family that stocked deep saved $180 a year in 1955 dollars, more than $2,100 today. The supermarket chains figured out the math quickly. By the mid-1960s, the bulk wholesale window at most grocery stores had been quietly eliminated. The new model was small, frequent purchases at retail markup. The deep pantry became inconvenient by design. They knew. We forgot. Number 15. The Sunday financial conversation. In 1955, almost every American married couple held a weekly household money meeting. It happened on Sunday afternoon, usually after church, usually at the kitchen table. The husband brought his pay envelope. The wife brought the household ledger and the bills due that week. Together, they decided how every dollar would be spent before the dollar arrived. The conversation lasted around 30 minutes. Surveys by family sociologists at the University of Chicago in 1958 found that 78% of married American couples held a regular weekly money meeting. By 2019, that number had dropped to 9%. Financial advisors today charge $250 an hour to mediate the same conversation that two adults used to have for free. A 1955 couple discussing money once a week stayed out of consumer debt almost entirely. The average modern household carries $7,200 in revolving credit because two adults can spend money in two different directions without ever consulting each other. The kitchen table was the original financial app. Number 14, the home garden and canning operation. This is the family teased at the start. In 1955, a farm wife in eastern Iowa kept a quarter-acre kitchen garden and a basement full of empty mason jars at the beginning of every spring. By October, the garden had produced 800 pounds of vegetables, and the basement held over 300 sealed jars: green beans, tomatoes, corn, peaches, jams, pickles, applesauce, and meat. That wall of jars was the family's grocery store from November through April. Modern accounting on the same operation, run by a working Iowa family in 2024, came out to roughly $4,000 in retail grocery savings annually. The garden seeds cost $14. The mason jars were reused from the previous generation. The labor was distributed across the family during evenings and weekends. The skill is not complicated. The U.S. Department of Agriculture published canning manuals from 1925 forward that any literate adult could follow. After World War II, frozen food companies launched massive campaigns labeling home canning as unsafe, primitive, and a breeding ground for botulism. The campaigns worked. The skill nearly disappeared. The Iowa family ignored every campaign. Their grandchildren still can every fall. The savings still match. Number 13, mending and repair. In 1955, every American household contained a sewing basket. Inside that basket were thread, needles, buttons, a darning egg, scissors, and a measuring tape. When a sock developed a hole, the wife darned it. When a button popped off a shirt, she sewed it back on the same day. When a hem ripped on a dress, she stitched it that evening. Clothes were repaired, not replaced. A 1955 work shirt cost $3.50 and was expected to last 7 years with maintenance. A modern work shirt costs $25 and lasts 2 years because the buttons fall off and nobody knows how to reattach them. The household sewing basket extended the life of every garment by 200 to 400%. Studies done by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1962 estimated that home mending saved the average American family $340 annually in 1962 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that figure represents roughly $3,500 a year in modern clothing replacement costs. The sewing basket is now a rare antique. Number 12, the buy once household. A General Electric refrigerator manufactured in 1955 routinely ran until 1995. A Maytag wringer washer purchased in 1952 was still being used by the same family in 1990. A Westinghouse oven from 1958 outlasted the marriage that installed it. American manufacturers in the 1950s built household appliances on a 30 to 40-year service life as a deliberate engineering standard. The math is brutal. A 1955 refrigerator cost $300, equivalent to roughly $3,500 today, and ran for 40 years at a true cost of $87 per year of service. A 2025 refrigerator costs $1,400, runs for 7 years on average, and costs $200 per year of service, more than double before accounting for the disposal fees and the landfill impact. Planned obsolescence was introduced in the 1960s as a deliberate engineering practice to drive replacement sales. Engineers openly bragged in trade journals. The 1955 American household bought 1 refrigerator in a lifetime. The 2025 American household will buy 4. The total cost difference is roughly $8,000 over a single working career. They knew. We forgot. Number 11, paying cash for a house. In 1955, the median American home cost $11,400, and the median household income was $4,800. A working family that saved 25% of every paycheck for 10 years could buy a home outright in cash. Mortgage-free homeownership was the rural and small-town norm into the late 1960s. The Federal Housing Administration changed the equation in 1968 when it formally promoted the 30-year mortgage as the standard American product. Within 15 years, the rate of mortgage-free homeownership among working Americans dropped from 38% to 11%. One Pennsylvania steelworker who bought his house in cash in 1962 paid $14,200 for it. The same house sold in 2023 for $387,000. He never paid a dollar of mortgage interest. He died with no debt and 4 paid-off children. The math has not changed. The behavior has. His grandchildren now rent apartments in 3 different states. Number 10, the savings first paycheck. Before 1978, American home economics classes formally taught every female high school student a single financial rule that overrode all others. On payday, the first dollars out of the paycheck went directly into a savings account before any bill was paid, before any grocery was bought, before any rent was sent. The target rate was 25% of gross income. The principle was direct. You do not have a budget. You have a savings rate. Everything else adjusts. In 1955, the average American household saved 11% of disposable income. By 1965, that number was 13%. The rate began collapsing in the late 1970s and reached its lowest point at 2.4% in 2005. The skill was removed from the home economics curriculum in 1978 through lobbying by consumer credit nonprofits funded by the American Bankers Association. The change was deliberate. It taught spending instead. Number 9, household manufacturing. In 1955, a working-class American family made 15 to 20% of its annual consumables at home: soap, candles, cleaning products, preserves, bread, and home-cured meat. The labor was distributed across the wife and children during evenings and weekends. The cost savings versus retail purchase ran 60 to 75% on each category. In 1973, the Federal Reserve published an internal analysis examining the household production gap. The conclusion was direct. American households produced too much of their own consumption. Commercial manufacturers needed that production transferred to the market in order to expand consumer credit and absorb the dollar inflation the Fed had just unleashed by exiting Bretton Woods 2 years earlier. Marketing campaigns followed. Home production was reframed as drudgery. Convenience became freedom. The household stopped producing. The consumer was born. The 1955 American household made things. The 2026 household buys them. Nobody really noticed. Number 8, paying cash for a car. In 1955, the average American working-class family bought a used car for $400 in cash, drove it for 10 years, and then bought another used car for $400 in cash. The transaction took a single afternoon. By 1975, more than half of all car purchases were financed at dealer rates between 4 and 6% over 3 years. The Federal Reserve actively encouraged this shift through Regulation W changes that loosened credit terms for consumer auto loans. By 2024, the average new car loan in the United States ran 68 months at an average rate of 9.6%, with a monthly payment of $742. Americans paid an additional $116 billion in auto loan interest in a single year. The 1955 worker owned his car free and clear. The 2026 worker rents his from a bank with monthly tribute. Lifetime interest, $8,000 per car. Number 7, the no-debt rule for depreciating assets. The American household in 1955 followed a simple discipline that has nearly vanished from modern financial advice: Never finance anything that loses value. Cars depreciated, appliances depreciated, clothing depreciated, furniture depreciated. The 1955 rule was straightforward. If you cannot pay cash for it, you cannot afford it. The only acceptable debt was the home mortgage, because real estate held value or appreciated over time. By 2024, the average American household carries $7,200 in credit card debt, $29,000 in auto loans, and $1,800 in store financing on appliances and furniture, almost entirely on depreciating goods. The total interest paid over a working lifetime on depreciating asset debt averages $190,000 per household. That figure is the difference between a comfortable retirement and working until 70. The 1955 rule was not a virtue. It was a defensive system. They knew. We forgot. Designed by the banks. Number 6. The United States Postal Savings System. From 1911 until 1967, the U.S. Post Office operated a federal savings program that paid 2% interest on deposits, guaranteed by the government, with no fees. At its peak in 1947, the system held over $3.4 billion in deposits from millions of working Americans who did not trust commercial banks after the failures of the 1930s. The program was eliminated by an act of Congress in 1966 after sustained lobbying by the American Bankers Association. The actual reason was that commercial banks could not compete with a federally guaranteed savings rate. Number 5. The family wedding jar. In 1955, a working-class American family started saving for a daughter's wedding the year she was born. A small amount went into a dedicated jar every month for 18 years. By the time she was engaged, $400 had been accumulated in cash. The wedding was paid for in full, with no debt and no loan. By 2024, the average American wedding cost $35,000, with 68% of couples paying on credit. Wedding loans generated $1.8 billion in interest revenue for banks in 2023. Same wedding, different math. Modern couples spend years paying it off. Number 4, the no monthly payments rule. A significant portion of 1955 American households followed a simple discipline. They refused to accept any monthly payment obligation. No financed appliances, no store credit, no installment plans, no subscription. The math was simple. A household with no monthly obligations could absorb a layoff or hard winter without losing its house. A household with $1,800 in monthly payments needed $21,600 of replacement income within 30 days of losing a paycheck. One was resilience. The other was a trap. Subscriptions alone now cost the average American $273 a month. Most people cannot even name them all. Number 3, saving silver coins as household reserves. This is the practice teased at the start. Until 1965, every American dime, quarter, and half dollar was minted from 90% silver. A working family that saved spare change in a mason jar accumulated a hedge against inflation without thinking about it. The dimes saved in 1955 are now worth $2.50 each in melt value. The quarters are worth over $6 each. A single mason jar of pre-1965 coins, the kind almost every American kitchen held in 1962, is worth roughly $4,000 today in silver alone. The Coinage Act of 1965, signed by President Johnson, removed silver from circulating coin. The federal policy that backed the American dollar with hard metal ended that summer. The reason given was a silver shortage. The actual reason was deliberate dollar debasement. They knew. We forgot. Number 2, the household price book. Until the early 1980s, almost every American mother kept a small spiral notebook in her purse with the prices of every staple grocery at every store she shopped. Milk at A&P, flour at Kroger, coffee at the corner market, bread at the bakery. The book was updated weekly. When she went grocery shopping, she knew the lowest price in town on every staple before she walked through the door. Studies done by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1976 showed that mothers who maintained price books spent 22% less on groceries than mothers who did not. The credit card industry needed this practice to die. A price book required cash discipline. A credit card required no discipline at all. The modern grocery app shows the price after you have already entered the store. Number 1, the integrated household economy. The greatest forgotten frugal habit was not a technique, it was a worldview. Until roughly 1980, the American household functioned as a single coordinated economic unit. Income was pooled. Decisions were made at the kitchen table. Wealth was built jointly across decades. The household produced its own food, its own meals, its own clothing repair, its own cleaning supplies, and its own children's care. It consumed less because it produced more. It saved more because it spent less. It carried no debt because it did not need any. The advertising industry and the consumer credit industry quietly broke the unit apart. The family economy was fragmented into a collection of individual consumers. The 1955 dollar stretched further than today's 100 because the 1955 household made it stretch. Today's household cannot stretch its 100 because the household no longer exists as an economic unit. It now exists as separate phones, separate cards, and separate appointments.